Amen. It's good to see everybody. I know that you guys are fighting that beautiful day today and just wanting to get inside and not be out there in the beautiful weather. Just kidding. It is an amazing day. I had the opportunity this morning to preach here at Cornerstone, and that went well. We have a good relationship with the church here, and it's exciting that they are open for us to basically borrow their space. So they're very gracious and kind in that, and we had a good time this morning. Several of our people were planning on being out this evening, so they were like, well, we're going to make it over there this morning. So we had a decent handful over there this morning. So yeah, continue to pray for our relationship with Cornerstone Community Church and all that stuff. So we have been going through the life of David, and it's been an encouraging, challenging adventure so far. We've only been in a few parts. Today we get to the part where David is intersected with his really closest friend. And so as he finds himself through this wild life of his, and as you study the life of David, you see that like there's good relationships and there's toxic relationships. And that's true for your life. That's true for my life. We have good friends, and we have friends that maybe aren't that great. And so today we're going to be looking at the first part was the God in the room. And when we started this series, we said, the beginning part of the life of David, it just seems like God is just another character in the room. It's just like somebody sitting on the couch over there as you're hanging out and you're interacting with somebody, and God's just there in the room. And then we talked about the God in the valley last week, where we looked at David and Goliath, and David was up against this monumental giant, and the God in the valley is the one who actually slayed the giants. Now we're looking at the God in the circle. Your life will be filled with circles. You'll have circles of people in your life. You'll have really close relationships, and they're going to make up that circle. And as I was thinking of my circles of friends that I've had over the years, they've changed, they've molded, they've fizzled out, they've disappeared, that kind of thing. It just happens, right? Some of you that are maybe my age or older, you can think back at some of your closest friends that you had when in seasons. A couple of times when I moved when I was a kid, like I'd find a couple of dudes that we were like, interested in Ninja Turtles together. And then I'd move again, somebody else that was my closest friend, that kind of thing. And then when you get to like the adolescent high school years, like I was in a place where those influences in my life really shaped me. The friends that I had around me, they in a way kind of like, they will steer you in certain directions. And that's true. Like that's just a principle that we know. So we're going to talk about the relationship that Jonathan and David had today. And we look at how these two friends, how they really helped each other and shaped each other. Question, what is a friend? Because we use that word, I don't know if you've noticed that we use that word friend now as a verb. Like you friend someone. Like it used to be, back before social media, you wouldn't friend somebody. Like, did you just friend me, dude? Like, that's not something we would do. But now, and I think we have kind of like our definition of friend is kind of like a mesh, right? I mean, it doesn't really hold up in a lot of ways. So what is a close friend? If you think about stories, movies, TV shows, look, every single good book, every single good movie, every single good TV show, your favorite movies, your favorite books, all of them, they have this element of friendship in that. Have you noticed that? Like I was thinking through that. I was thinking about Kirk and Spock. I think they're from Star Wars. I just offended some people in here. Sorry. But, they're like friends. They're buddies. Stand By Me is a movie that came out in the 80s. It's not a great movie, but it's about these friends. And you think about all these movies like Goonies. That was on the other day, and I was just laughing because they were being goofy and stupid. You think of Napoleon Dynamite, him and, what's his name? Pedro. See, you're with me. Finding Nemo. They're two fish in a fish tank. But what made that movie so, endearing to us as people is the bond that those friends had, right? Who was it? It was like Marlin and another. Yeah, so Forrest and Bubba. Anybody know what I'm talking about there? Sam and Frodo. Like all the Fast and the Furious movies, like those have cool cars, cool scenes and stuff like that. But really it's the relationships in those movies that cause us, when we see these friendships and these relationships around us and in movies, like we're drawn to that. And then we kind of look at our own friendships and things like that. Maybe some movies aren't that great with friendships, like My Girl. Have you ever seen My Girl? Yeah? Don't watch it if you haven't seen it, because the friendship, it's tough. But every good, even, I was thinking like even like great movies of like somebody being like isolated, like Castaway. Tom Hanks plays an amazing character by himself on an island, but the only way to really make that movie even better is for him to have a friend, right? And it's Wilson. That's the same character that starred in Top Gun. That volleyball scene in Top Gun. Did you know that was the same actor that played that volleyball as in James, you're looking at me weird. Don't look at me like that. We have connections through friendships. And a friendship connection is a critical part of life. Extremely critical. St. Augustine, thousands of years ago, a long time ago, he said, in this world, two things are essential: a healthy life and friendship. Why is that like that? It's like that because God wired us like that. He wired us for relationships. He didn't wire us to put us on an island marooned by ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to find a volleyball and we're going to have like long interacting conversations with a volleyball because we're designed that way. So consider your circle of friends. How has it changed? How has it changed you? How has all that interacted as you've moved on from different things? The healthiest circle that you can have is one that God is welcomed and wanted and honored in that circle. David's life, as you'll see, David's life was filled with many relationships. Some were great friendships and some were toxic relationships. And sometimes we can't see the difference. Like there were times in my life when I was growing up that I thought like, man, and then somebody's like, hey, you got to get away from that person. What are you talking about? I could get offended. And then I get away from that person. I'm like, it's like a screen came off, and I'm like, oh wow, I saw how that was an individual that had a negative influence in my life. The psalmist says in Psalm 1:1-4, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He's like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and the leaf does not wither, and all he does he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like chaff that the wind drives away. So we're going to look at this friendship with Jonathan and David today. Before we do that, let's pray and ask God to help us with his word. God, thank you for your word. God, we're intrigued, Lord, at how you've designed us to not just get involved with people in relationships, but God, you've built us in a way that's the way we thrive in relationships and friendships, God. So I pray, God, that you would teach us, that you would encourage us, that you would instruct our hearts today through your word. God, we love you. We pray this in your good name. Amen. So we talk about a godly friend. We talk about good friends. A good friend is a godly friend, but they also are committed. So number one, we talk about these friendships. Is that coming up? Is that there, Maggie? It's not there? Why not? Okay. It should be. A godly friend commits. The first thing. A godly friend commits. So let's look at this committed, loyal friendship that Jonathan and David had. So first of all, in 1 Samuel chapter 18, 1-5, it says, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, now this is right after David and Goliath situation happened. So David whoops up on Goliath. It's a pretty amazing story if you remember last week. I got pretty excited about it. I got goofy about it. But anyway, so as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. Okay? Now you don't have a whole lot of frame of reference for that. You're not sitting there thinking, "Oh yeah, I remember when me and my best bud, when our souls were knitted together." Like, is that like something that God's like, all right, y'all just be still for a minute. Y'all calm down. I know you're excited. I know you like hanging out with each other, but I got to do some knitting, so just wait. So it says that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. So this committed friendship between David and Jonathan starts out, man, this is a deep friendship. This is a friendship that, like, man, this is something that it's going to be hard to rattle this friendship. And if you're reading this, you're like, man, that's an interesting sounding friendship. Like, what's going on there? But their souls are knit together. In verse 2, it says, and Saul, good, it's working. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. Now, if you're reading this, you're like, this is kind of strange. Like, did they just meet? And you're like, hey, how are you? And then like start knitting, like their soul is knitted together. And then Jonathan's like, all right. When David's like, well, what's next? Well, now I give you my clothes. So in our minds, we're like, what's happening here? But what they're doing is they're growing in their relationship with one another. They're interacting with one another, and it's showing how deep their relationship and their friendship is going to grow. And so Jonathan made this covenant with David. Now, this friendship covenant is him saying to David, look, I am going to be your guy forever. Now, this is important. Now, listen to me, David. This is Jonathan speaking to David. He said, listen to me. This is important for me to have this interaction with you right now because I am the king's son. Now, what I'm doing, I'm taking off this like royal garment, this royal armor, and I'm giving it to you. And so it's not like David's sitting here interacting with Jonathan. He's like, yeah, thanks for your stuff, pal. I'll put it in my suitcase and take it home later. Like, this is like a radical situation going on here. Like, this is Jonathan basically saying, hey, I'm in line for the throne of the entire nation. But I'm stepping aside in a way to knit my soul and my commitment and my devotion to you. So a true godly friend is somebody that commits. A committed, loyal friend. I remember there were times when I had friends that if something, like we had occasional things that would go on and like we kind of like left each other, you know, like we'd sell out or whatever like that. And I don't know if I've ever really known this kind of friendship. They're knit together at the soul like an unbreakable bond till death. It almost sounds like they're getting married or something here. It's like a deeper relationship in friendship. And so it's this incredible thing what's happening here. Verse 5, it says, and David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. So now Saul has David. When it says he like didn't let him go, he didn't kidnap him. He's like, I need you around. So when you were there and you walked up and you took out the giant, you took his head off, hey, that can be good for us. If you win battles against armies by yourself like that often, then you're not going back to being shepherd boy. And so that's what Saul sees in David. And then Jonathan sees something in David. And Jonathan's like, okay, well, I don't know what's going to be happening with you, but here's my armor. Like, I'm just like it's almost like he's bowing before him saying, I'm your guy forever. No matter what happens, I'm your guy. I'm going to protect you no matter what comes your way, even if I have to protect you from yourself. That's a committed friend right there. And it says David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. So Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So here you have Jonathan and David getting connected as buddies, but now David is incredibly gifted and skilled at war and leadership and winning. David just wins at everything. Everything he touches turns to gold. Every single battle he goes to, they just win and win and win. And Saul's like, that's good for me. David's like, I can be a friend of that. One of the things that you can, if you just Google marks of a loyal friend, like what makes up a loyal friend, there's things like this, like committed dependability. You can listen to them. You can trust them. You can laugh with them. But also this commitment with godly friends, their commitment to one another, that leads to sharpening. Like if you have a godly friend, your relationship with that friend, that will lead to sharpening. Many of you know the verse of Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. So you want friendships in your life that sharpen you. There was a time in my life where I had friends in my life and I'm like, I didn't say this because I didn't understand the biblical truth, but I realized that they're not sharpening me. You know, when you ever sharpened a blade? You know, you have to get it just at the right angle and you go over that whetstone, is what they call it, right? You ever done that? Back and forth? Or maybe you're like a cook or a chef, you do it really good. But if you have it like this and you go straight at it like that and you saw at it, you're going to dull the blade. It's a delicate process. You got to get just at the right angle to sharpen that blade. You got to get the right rhythm and movement in there to really sharpen that blade. It's the same way with friendships. You got to get the right situation set up to where you sharpen each other. Just like the Bible says, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. A committed friend leads to sharpening. A biblical, God-centered, godly friend will lead to sharpening. And the other way will lead to dulling. We can go sometime to the Home of Grace. It's a pretty successful drug rehab facility, and you can go to the graduation on Fridays. Every Friday at about 1 o'clock they do graduation. They have a few guys that stand up and they all give a little speech. You could ask every single guy. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people come through the Home of Grace. You can ask them to share your story about what happened to you. How did you slip off the slope? How did you get to the place where you were just totally just bent out of shape with drugs and everything like that? You listen to their story. What's gonna pop up in every single story? Relationships. Who they were around. Decisions they made based on some of the stuff that happened with depending on who they were around. So, a committed, godly friend leads to sharpening. It also leads, or their commitment also ensures survival. Listen to this. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12 says, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm. But how can anyone keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A 3-4 cord is not quickly broken. If you have friends in your life, godly, committed friends, they don't just sharpen you, they will help you survive in this life spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Your friends can either crush you, and they can lead to hope and joy and peace, or they can cause you to survive. And I have story after story of that being true in my life, and it will be true in your life too. I don't know if you liked those childhood games whenever they'd have like a field day or something, but my least favorite of all the games was tug of war. And I hated it. I don't know why. Even when I think about it, like I don't want to grab the rope. I felt like I was pulling and nothing was happening, and like I'd shift forward and like I'd be mad at the person, and they'd have like this big old fat gonzo bean over there, whatever that is, and they'd have this big old dude, and I'm like, we're just going to fail. Like we're going to go into the mud pit. I didn't like tug of war because I felt like my team was always going against me. But if it's all of us in here, if we set up a tug of war match, then we get all the kids back there, like I'm putting my money on us, y'all. We're going to win. Bradley and James are in the back. You know, right? Caitlin and a couple of y'all are up in the front screaming and hollering like that. And like, we're going to win. And I'm just going to hold the rope while y'all pull. And I'm just going to scoot back like that. And all of our kids are going to be dragging face first in the dirt as we drag across the finish line. Raise up our hands in victory, right? We're going to slaughter them in tug of war, right? Y'all smiling. Y'all want to do it, don't you? Let's get it together. Let's make it happen. Why are we winning? Because we're stronger. We're working together. We're holding on. There's no way we would lose that. So if you have a friendship in your life that's committed, that's solid, it's like that rope that can't be broken. It ensures your survival. You're not going to be dragging yourself in life face first through the dirt as something's dragging you away from whatever you're trying to win at. So not only do godly friends, do they have commitment, like we see Jonathan and David's commitment, but godly friends, they connect. They really connect. So whenever you find friends in your life, you find friends based on maybe some like affinity or something like that. You know, like if I really like Pokemon cards and, 80s metal and, like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. If those are like my 3 favorite things in life. Well, if I try to make a friend with somebody that hates those things, Jim's like, I'm with you, man. He likes those. Those are his 3 favorite things in life. So if you like those things, there's your buddy. But it's going to be hard for me to, I'm not going to have, if Christian's big into lawn care and that's all he wants to talk about, then he's not going to want to talk about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He's going to be like, hey, man, I'm trimming up my line here. You're over here talking about Daniel the Tiger or something like that. Like, that's not my thing. So godly friends, they connect. They have this kindred spirit. Now, when you look at this passage that we just were introduced to Jonathan, like I have to ask myself, well, who's this Jonathan guy? Like, well, I want to know more about him. At this point, it just looks like somebody that sees David and is like, man, you did really cool with that giant thing. Here's my shirt. But there's more to this Jonathan guy. Look back in 1 Samuel 14, 1 through 15. One day Jonathan, the son of Saul, this is one of my favorite passages in the Old Testament, of one of my favorite guys in the Old Testament, and one of my favorite guys in the room too, Jonathan. He's back there. One day Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeon under the pomegranate cave at Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men, including Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord at Shiloh, wearing the ephod. You can look into that later if you want to. And the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. So Jonathan is by himself with his little armor bearer. I don't know what his name is. We'll call him Steve. So it's Jonathan and Steve. Within the passes by which Jonathan sought out to go over to the Philistine garrison, there's a rocky crag on one side and a rocky crag on the other side, so it just means it's going to be difficult to pass. And then they named the rocky crags for some reason. Verse 5, it says, one crag rose up from Michmash and the other crag from Gibeon. And now let's go to verse 6. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor. All right, so here's Jonathan coming up with a plan. Him and his little guy, he's like, okay, my dad and everybody else, there's like hundreds and hundreds of warriors over there. They're trying to deliberate and come up with a plan. Let's me and you go pick a fight with all of them, just me and you. And the armor bearer's like, what? Okay. So Jonathan said to his young man carrying his armor, come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us. For nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few. And his armor bearer said to him, do all that is in your heart. Now, when he says do all that is in your heart, do as you wish, behold, I'm with you, heart and soul. Like, yeah, he says that, but you got to realize, like, this is the prince. This is Jonathan, who is, like, next in line to the throne, and this is basically his slave. So his servant's not going to be like, it's a bad idea, I'm going home, man. My mom's making peanut butter and jelly tonight, I'm out. Like, he can't say that. Like, he can't say, I'm going to go watch Daniel the Tiger instead of going with you over here to these Philistines. So now he's like, do everything you want. I'm with you. Then Jonathan said, all right, here's the plan. Behold, we will cross over to the men, and we will show ourselves to them. Like, we're not even sneaking up on them. Broad daylight. Let's just pop. Here we are. We'll show ourselves to them. If they say, wait until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place and will not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, then we'll go up, for the Lord has given them into our hands, and this shall be a sign for us. What? If I'm the armor bearer, I'm like, okay, so either way, we're dying today. This is like broad daylight. We're going to pick a fight with the best armed and trained men everywhere. And so, verse 11, so both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, look, Hebrews are coming up out of the holes that they've hidden themselves. And the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, hey, come up here, let us show you a thing. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has given them into our hands of Israel. Now they're like having to do this rock climbing thing. And Jonathan and his armor bearer is picking a fight with this whole unit in this army. Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet and his armor bearer after him. And they fell before Jonathan and his armor bearer, and they killed them after him. And that first strike, which Jonathan and his armor bearer made, killed about 20 men within about a half a furlong's length of an acre of land. And there was great panic in the camp, in the field, and among the people. And the garrison and even the raiders trembled, the earthquake, and it became a very great panic. That just recently happened with Jonathan. So now go back to Jonathan and David meeting for the first time. And Jonathan's taking off his armor and saying, man, this belongs to you now. It's not like Jonathan is some guy that doesn't have any courage. In fact, he's kind of nutso. So what I'm thinking is going on here is these two wild dudes. Think back at David and Goliath's story. David shows up. Everybody's like, what's wrong? Like, everybody's trembling in their boots. There's a giant 10-foot, however tall guy standing there in the valley taunting. He's like, I just need a couple of rocks. I can beat this guy. And so I have a feeling that David maybe he heard about this story right here. And so when David, I'm just in my mind, I'm imagining them getting together in a room, and David's like, hey, I heard that story about you and your little armor guy. You just ran up to the whole, like, encampment and you killed them all? Man, that's awesome. And then Jonathan's like, yeah, I was there when you cut the giant's head off. That was awesome too. Yeah, we should be pals. Like, yeah, now we're buddies. Here's my armor kind of thing. So they have this kindred spirit. Whenever you find a good, committed, godly friend, you will connect. Now, the thing is you want to connect with things that are genuine, that are true, that are biblical. You don't want to just have some random connection with somebody because of Pokemon cards. That's weak. You want deep, godly, committed friendships that last and sustain and that will sharpen you, that will lead to your survival spiritually. Those are the kind of friends that we need. That's the kind of friends that I need. Godly friends, they connect. They have this kindred spirit. So when we talk about God in the circle, this circle of friends that you have, God has to fit into that circle. Otherwise, it's just going to be kind of a painful situation. So a godly friend connects, commits. A godly friend also protects. Now, what happens afterwards is very fascinating in the life of David. Saul gets, he kind of loses his lid a little bit. 1 Samuel 19, 1 through 7. And Saul spoke to Jonathan, his son, and to all the servants that they should kill David. What? So hold on, time out. So Saul, you're king. You're tormented emotionally by some kind of force in your life. And David is the only one that helps you because he plays music so well. And you're trembling in your boots with your army sitting there. You'll have no plan. And David shows up in the middle and says, I'll take out the giant. And now you're ready to kill him? So what happens is there's this thing called, there's a jealousy thing that swells up in Saul. And it just totally destroys a relationship with David and Saul. So now Saul is ready to kill him. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. Why? Because they're friends. They're friends. They're knit together at the soul. Jonathan made a covenant with David. Hey, I'm with you no matter what happens. Well, now it comes down to a no matter what. Who do I stand with? Do I stand with David, my friend, who I'm knit together at the soul? Or do I backpedal? And Jonathan told David, Saul, my father, seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are. And I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I'll tell you. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you. Because his deeds have brought good to you. Like what? He's talking to Dad. He's like, Dad, like, what's the deal? You want to kill him? You want to take him out? Like everything he's done's been good for you. Don't sin against David and sin against God. And verse 5 says, for he took his life in his hands and he struck down the Philistine. And the Lord worked a great salvation for all of Israel. You saw it and you rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without a cause? And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. Whew. Jonathan's like, man, glad I took care of that. Let's move on to something else now. It gets more complicated. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. When you talk about a friend that protects you, a godly friend will protect you. They'll be there when something's about to crash upon you, and they'll help you. They'll guide you. They'll protect you. Proverbs 17:17, it says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Now, if you read that wrong, it looks like that, okay, so if a brother in my life is there for complicated adversity and problems. That's not what that means. What that means is that a friend, a close friend, close enough to even be considered a brother, they are in your life when adversity strikes. You're not standing there looking around by yourself. Like, how am I going to deal with this situation in my life? This is all coming crashing down on my head. I'm standing there by myself. That's when we can dip into Ecclesiastes and say, look, that 3 chord, that's not easily broken. You need people around you, by you, helping you, encouraging you, leaning on you. When you're about to fall over this way, you got somebody that lifts you up this way, and you're about to fall this way. You have people in your life that protect you and they help you. Your greatest friends will interrupt you on your path to ensure that you are rerouted back to the center of God's design and purposes for your life. Have you ever been going on a trip and your GPS says rerouting? Don't you just hate that? Take a U-turn. And 600 feet, take a U-turn. And 500 feet, take a U-turn. And then it goes down, and then it misses it and says, it's another 700 feet, take a U-turn. It's rerouting you. It's rerouting you. It thinks you're off course, and it's trying to get you back on course. A good friend, this friend's Jonathan's trying to reroute the whole course. David is in danger. And Jonathan's like, nope, I'm going to protect him. I'm going to reroute what's going on. You know, a good friend will reroute you and get you back on center, the place where God has designed you for the purposes for your life. And a lot of times I think we as friends, we might say, if somebody gets off course in our life, a friend, we go sure, that's what you want to do, go ahead. That's a difficult situation. If you have a friend, if you have a relationship with somebody and they're stepping off into a path of destruction, what's easy for us to do is yeah, sure, go ahead. But that's not what we should do. We should stop them. We should reroute them. We should look at them and say, what the heck are you doing? Why are you on this path? That's what a great friend does. And so the question I think we should ask is, are you a great friend? Ask yourself, are you a fantastic friend? One of the things I ask myself is, and I don't do a great job of living the answer, but I ask myself, and I've challenged some of the guys with this, when you're in a situation, you can ask yourself, what would a fantastic dad do right now? What would a fantastic husband do right now? If you're in a situation, you have a friend, and they're in a tough situation, ask yourself, what would a fantastic friend do right now? Would a fantastic friend be like, yeah, well, I know it's my dad. He's pretty powerful. I sure hope it works out for you. No, what Jonathan did, Jonathan tried to reroute the situation. That's a fantastic friend. Fantastic friend. He's ensuring his survival because a good friend tries to protect. It gets deeper into that. Look, 1 Samuel 20, 24 through 34 says, so David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat on his seat, as in other times, and on the seat by the wall, Jonathan sat opposite, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty. Yet Saul did not say anything from that day, for he thought, something has happened to him. He is not clean. Surely he will not be clean to eat. He's talking about being ceremonial clean to eat. Verse 27. On the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was still empty, and Saul said to Jonathan his son, why has not the son of Jesse come to the meal either yesterday or today? Now, Saul's not like, man, I miss David. Saul's got it out for him, okay? Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go, for our clans hold a sacrifice in the city. My brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason, he has not come to the king's table. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. And he said to him, listen to this. Who says this? You son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? What? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. You see what's going on in the mind of Saul? Man, this guy's got something tricky going on there. Therefore sin and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Then Jonathan answered Saul his father, why should he be put to death? What has he done? He's still stepping into this place of protecting his friend at grave consequences to himself. He says, what has he done that you're going to kill him? But Saul hurled a spear at him to strike him. Now Saul's trying to chop away at his son. So David knew that his father was determined to put David to death. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. Verse 34, Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David because his father had disgraced him. A friend will protect from a spear, from the inside or for the outside. This committed friend that David and Jonathan show themselves to be, they're guiding each other. They're protecting each other. They're committing to each other. This is the kind of friendship that like we should vow in our hearts to try to be this type of friend. To have God in the circle of our friends. 1 Samuel 20, verse 3. David vowed again, your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes, and he thinks, do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there's but a step between me and death. So what you find when you keep reading, verse 4 of chapter 20, then Jonathan said to David, whatever you say, I will do for you. You see this deep, committed friendship. And on in verse 16 of chapter 23, and Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. Great, deep friendships in God. Your friends in the circle. You want God in the circle. And as God is in the circle, He is in charge of the circle. You're committed to each other. You're committed to God. Jonathan stayed true. This is amazing. Jonathan stayed true to David throughout his entire life. And he was having these conversations with Dad, like, why do you want to take him out? What's wrong with you? What has he done? And then when Jonathan dies, and David just weeps. Just weeps. And he loses that protection. He loses that friend. And it's later on after that. You find it. You can keep reading. It's in 2 Samuel where David's life starts dipping and kind of starting to spiral out of control. He starts losing ties with these solid friends. And he sinks. Why? Because friendships matter. They'll make you or they'll break you. And you have friends that are connected to God, and the God in that circle will make all the difference. There's great reward. There's great reward in friendships. Some of you have had some amazing times with people that you know in your life. Friendships. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you're doing. That's a great reward. If that's happening, if you have somebody in your life that's encouraging you, that's building you up, it says, just as you are doing, and hold on to that friendship. Proverbs 27:9. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. That's a great reward in a friend where you can go to him and say, hey, I have friends in my life that I can go to and say, hey, I need to talk to y'all about something. I need to pick your brain about something. That's what this is talking about. Listen to this verse. Jesus said this in John 15:13. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Jesus is talking about his self-sacrifice for his circle, for his friends, his people. Not only is there great reward in friendship, but there's great warnings in friendship. There's great warnings in friendship. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:33, he says, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. We know this. This is a tough verse. Bad company can corrupt you. Proverbs 13:20. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Another translation says a companion of fools will be destroyed. That's the circle. Your circle matters. Having God in that circle of friends. Faithful. Listen to this. Verse 27 of Proverbs. Chapter 27, verse 6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. That means that a friend that will come to you in your circle, this circle that's put together with God in the circle, and if you stray away, a friend will come to you and say, what the heck are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're being an idiot. You need to get back on track. Now, that's a painful thing to say to somebody, but that's what a good friend does. Tries to keep them close in tight proximity to the God in the circle, and through that's where you win in friendships. You will be slayed like the giant, or you will thrive like Jonathan in your friendships. So what are qualities of your friendships? Do you have deep, lasting friendships? Are you a fantastic friend? Doesn't mean that you always keep your friends happy. That's not what that means. It just means that you're the best friend. You don't have to have a best friend, but you need to be the best friend that you can possibly be. Be the best man or the best woman in that circle. Be the best. Doesn't mean it's the easiest. Be the best one another in that circle. One of the things we've talked about before, we talked about this a lot. There are all these one another statements that the Bible gives us. There's tons of them. Be at peace with one another. Don't grumble against one another. Be of the same mind with one another. Accept one another. Wait for one another before you do communion. Don't boastfully challenge or envy one another. Gently, patiently tolerate one another. Be kind, tenderhearted, and forgiving to one another. Bear with and forgive one another. Seek the good of one another. Don't repay evil for evil. Don't complain against one another. Confess your sins to one another. Love one another. Through love, serve one another. Tolerate one another in love. Be devoted to one another. Give preference to one another in honor. Regard one another as more important than yourselves. Serve one another. Wash each other's feet. Don't be haughty. Be of the same mind. Be subject to one another. Clothe yourself in humility toward one another. Don't judge and don't put a stumbling block in a brother's way. Greet one another kindly. Husbands and wives, don't deprive one another of physical intimacy. Bear one another's burdens. Speak truth to one another. Don't lie to one another. Like, these are qualities of a friendship, and a tight friendship that, like, it's got to be a godly, God-centered, God in the circle friendship. And these are the qualities. It says, encourage and build up one another. Comfort one another. Stimulate one another to love and good works in Christ. Pray for one another. Be hospitable to one another. Be the absolute best, fantastic friend in your circle. Be that. You know how that can be so beneficial to the people in your life. If you're just like, I'm going to do everything I can to, in my circle, keep God in the center, God in the circle, and around my circle, I'm going to be the best, most fantastic friend. Might not be the best man in the room, but I'm going to do everything I can to be the best man in the circle. Now, the God in the circle is Jesus. He is our greatest friend. That's really what we need to come down to when we go through this. We need to land at this, that it's Jesus who said, greater love has no one than this, that he would lay down his life for his friends. Jesus looked at his friends and said, no longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I call you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I've made known to you. Proverbs 18:24. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. He's talking about the Lord. James 2:23. And the scripture was fulfilled in saying, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. One of my wife's favorite songs is about being a friend of God. You can ask her to sing that later. John 15:14. You are my friends if you do what I command you. We should strive to maintain and grow our friendship with Jesus, because he is the God in the circle. Your friends, the people that you surround yourself with, they matter. It matters a lot how you pick those people. Jesus shows us his friendship to us, and he gave it all for us. So if you're a believer today, you need to challenge your heart to be the best friend you can possibly be. And that might mean that you have to say some things to your friends that might not be easy to say. That's the best friend. That might mean that you try to do whatever you can to bring your circle closer to the God in the circle. That's not easy. I had friends when I was in high school. I had friends when God really started working in my life. I had buddies that, like, they did not like it. They're like, we don't like this new Jesus rod. Like, you're annoying. We don't want to talk about that. We're not interested in that. And I tried to, like, pull my friends in closer to God, and I didn't really do a good job at that. And there were some that they overdosed. They died. They got in car wrecks, and they didn't make it. And I'm still hanging on to some of that. There's still a little bit in the basement when I think about some of my friends that didn't make it. And it's tough. So any circle that I find myself in, of friends, whether in this room or in another room, I want to be the best friend that I can possibly be. And the way that I'm the best friend that I can possibly be is I can point everybody in that circle to the deepest, most center part of being towards the heart of God and the God in the circle. And that's not easy, but that's what we're called to do. That's what Jonathan did. That's what David did for Jonathan. So if you're a believer, commit to being the best friend possible. If you're not a believer, the best friendship, I think, is waiting for you. And that's your friendship with Jesus. Let him be in the center of your circle. And then you can thank him for being your friend. He's a good friend. He is. So we're going to close in prayer, and you get an opportunity to pray. And I'm going to ask you that you talk to your friend. Talk to Jesus. Is he in the center of your circle? The circles that you have. Maybe you have multiple circles. Maybe some of those circles are wild, and they're so far from the God in the circle. So what do you have to do? What are some maybe scary, painful steps that you need to take to bring that circle in? It can happen. I've seen it before. It can happen. It doesn't mean that you just have to automatically jump ship and abandon that circle. It might. I've had to abandon circles before. It's not easy. But be the best friend that you could possibly be. Get close to the God in the circle of your friends. It's life-changing. It really is.